Time to take a look at news stories making headlines around the globe. The Nigerian Press Organization, comprising of the Newspapers Proprietors Association of Nigeria and the Nigerian Guild of Editors and the Nigerian Union of Journalists, has decided to name the newly rebuilt Nigerian Institute of Journalism House in Victoria Island, Lagos, as the Ismaila Issa House. The organization says the gesture is to honor the life and times of Malam Ismaila Issa Funtua for his untiring contributions to the development of journalism and freedom of press in Nigeria and around the world. The press organization says Malam Issa Funtua's contribution to the development of journalism are innumerable, including his co-founding of Democrat newspaper, the presidency of the Newspapers of Proprietors Association at a time of national crisis, and a life patron of the association. It also cited Issa Funtua's services to the International Press Institute, where he served on the global board, and his contribution to journalism education as chairman of the Governing Council of Nigerian Institute of Journalism. Malam Ismaila Issa Funtua died on Monday after a life of dedicated service to Nigeria that spanned politics, business, and media. In a statement on behalf of the collective leadership of the Nigerian media, Ndukau Baigwana, the president of Nigeria Press Council and the Newspapers Proprietors Association, said Ismaila Issa Funtua will be greatly missed but not forgotten. This is, one of the ways, numerous ways to celebrate and immortalize a great man.
Indeed, well deserved. Yesterday we were talking about how some journalists found it offensive that he was only referred to on the front pages of the newspapers, major newspapers, as an ally to the president. We talked about how, he transcends beyond that, from public to private life to business to the press, and how he's a champion. He was a champion for press freedom, so I think it's well-deserving.
Yes, I think it's well-deserved. This is the third day we're commenting on Alhaji Ismaila Issa Funtua. And you will recall that I had made a point that he was chairman at a point of the board of the Nigerian Institute of Journalism. And that's the institute, that trains journalists at the level, up to the level of a diploma. I hope that someday that institute will become a university of its own, or in its own regard, and award degrees in journalism. And I think that the honor that has been done to Alhaji Ismaila Issa Funtua is a very good development. I made a point yesterday that oftentimes, the media, we don't celebrate our own. And I said that Alhaji Ismaila Issa Funtua's importance should be properly located. That was the phrase that I used. And it's very interesting, and it will be a source of encouragement for many journalists that, at least for once, the Nigerian media is celebrating one of its own. And I've just seen this advert on page 9 of This Day Today that is signed by Prince Ndukau Baigwana, the president of the Nigerian Press Organization, president also of the Newspaper Proprietors Association of Nigeria, speaking on behalf of the entire community. Because many people, when they look at the story of Alhaji Issa Funtua, they say, oh, he's an ally of the president, or he's a businessman because he went on to become an entrepreneur. They tend to forget his background as a journalist, as the founding managing director of the Democrat newspaper, and also as a patron, life patron of the International Press Institute, life patron of the Nigerian Publishers Association of Nigeria. And the only other additional point that I think we need to make is to the fact that, look, I once wrote an essay in which I talked about the ethnic coloration of the Nigerian media, and where I made the point that, look, northern newspapers, if you look at the history of newspapers from the north, when a northerner is president of Nigeria, they tend to support that northerner blindly. The moment you have a southerner as president of Nigeria or head of state, the northern newspapers will collectively just turn against that person. That essay was devoted to the print media. I didn't go as far as looking at the broadcast media. But you will see that in his own case, You know, this was a publisher, this was a media person who built bridges across, who, you know, had no trace of ethnic bigotry. And I think that, you know, the succeeding generations of northern media owners and journalists would have to learn some lessons from his example. And we have seen that trend continuing. But if tomorrow I see that there is a change, maybe I will write an update essay, you know, to update what I wrote previously. But I think we're very glad. And every journalist should also see that when you contribute, when you do well, you will be remembered, but you will not be forgotten.
All right, that's all we can take on news headline. We'll take a short break now. Well, when we return, we'll have the trio of Rotus, Michael, and Aaron to give us updates on African and global business and COVID-19. Stay with us.
Welcome back to the Morning Show here on Arise News. Our ever reliable Rotus Odiri is now here to give us Africa business update. Good morning, Rotus.
Good morning, Doctor. Good morning, Adesuwa. And good morning, Rufai. We kick off with the Nigerian Stock Exchange. Yesterday, very, very flat performance. If we can pull up our charts here and take a look at the Nigerian Stock Exchange All-Share Index. Yeah, there it is. So yesterday, the market closed down by, forget this, 0.004%. I mean, very flat performance. The points story, all-share index is at 24,173 points. If you take a look at a couple of things on this chart here, going back from last year, look at the arrow that's pointing upwards. We peaked in January, almost at 30,000 points, about 29,000 or so. And then you see the arrow going down. That's around the March period, around when the lockdown happened. We cratered, the market cratered to almost 20,000 points. We've climbed back up, but the performance has been essentially quite flat. If we look at the NSE 30, look at the next chart to the NSE 30. That essentially has mirrored the all-share index performance. The NSE 30 is the 30 most capitalized stocks on the Nigerian Stock Exchange. And if we can bring that up, you'll see the chart is moving. There it is. I had to put a circle because the chart is exactly similar to the all-share index chart. So these are the 30 most capitalized stocks. Same flat performance if you look at the very end of the chart there. If we look at the performers, yesterday's performers, the NSE 30 performers, only 3 stocks registered any movement. GTB was the only gainer. If we pull up the NSE 30 performance there, GTB was the only gainer, whilst I believe Fidelity and Sterling Bank were the only losers. Yeah, there we go. So, I mean, just 3 stocks moving. Everybody else on the NSE 30 was essentially flat. So, I mean, the sentiment on the market right now, it looks like perhaps investors, you know, there's been the talk of the, you know, foreign exchange backlog, foreign portfolio investors wanting to exit. It looks like they're just having a wait-and-see approach right now. Perhaps also the market is also waiting for second quarter earnings to come in. And this second quarter period is probably going to reflect the lockdown impact. And it's expected to be the softest quarter for publicly traded companies. So I just wanted to highlight this because we'll be interested to see how the market moves as, you know, we get the flow of second quarter performance for publicly traded companies on the exchange. But I don't know, it looks like investors are waiting for some sort of catalyst that is going to spur movements on the exchange, because right now things have just been very, very even, very flat on the market. We move from the stock exchange to the NCC, the Nigerian Communications Commission there. They have an implementation here of something they call the ASF, which is an accounting separation framework. And this is for licensed players in the telecommunications space. They just announced this yesterday, but it's effective July the 15th. All licensed players in the telco space must submit financials to the NCC. Now, this is very interesting. It has to be within 7 months of the end of the financial year. So if your financial year ends in December, then you have until through August of the following year to submit your financials to the NCC. Now, also, mandated companies that have to submit financials, they mentioned them: Airtel, Glo, 9 Mobile, MTN, Main One, and IHS Nigeria. Now, what they've said is that other players within the space can voluntarily submit their financials. This is supposed to be a transparency initiative on the part of the NCC. And we have a quote here from Mr. Umar Dambata, who is the Professor Umar Dambata, the Executive Vice Chairman of the NCC. Says the new ASF, the separation framework, will promote an industry environment that fosters open and transparent financial reporting while ensuring that charges for telecom services are cost-based and non-discriminatory. Now, the interesting thing, though, is that if we look, I think we've got the stock price for MTN and Airtel. Yeah, there we go. So these two companies are already publicly traded companies on the Nigerian Stock Exchange. So they already disclose their financials to the public. We can already see what that is. So, but again, for the other players, Glow is still private. The other ones, Mine One, and so on and so forth. Those are other private companies. There's a debate here as to whether or not you can mandate a private company that doesn't have to disclose its financials to the public to send them over to you. So we'll see how that goes. But the regulator is putting that in place. What they said is that they will look at this for 2 years and then see if they will add more players to the mandated space. So only those 6 companies are mandated to do this now, including private and public. Next up, South Africa. South African restaurants say they are crying out for what they are calling job-killing restrictions on their operations in South Africa. You can see these folks protest. This guy says, waitering pays my tuition fees. He's a waiter that pays his school fees by working in a restaurant. These folks are saying, bring back, you see that hashtag, bring back alcohol. They've essentially, Ramaphosa allowed limited seating capacity when he eased the lockdown in South Africa in restaurants. But he said no alcohol sales are allowed. There's a quote that we have here from a Louis Manzetta. There he is. He's a restaurant owner. He says, I'd like the government to reinstate the sale of alcohol, which would then make my business sustainable to a certain extent. Look at this. Alcohol in my restaurant accounts for 40% of my sales. So you can see the struggles that restaurateurs are going through over in South Africa with regards to how the lockdown is affecting them. If you wipe off 40% of your sales, I mean, that's almost half. So, but again, they're dealing with COVID-19. I know Aaron will come and give us the latest updates on COVID-19. They're having to deal with that. How do you balance between having to restrict these companies from operations because of the need to maintain safety? So South Africa, a whole lot of issues that they're still going through. Finally, Kenya. Nairobi has a massive infrastructure project. This is just a 3D rendition of, I believe it's a 423-acre plan to extend investment through to Nairobi. Massive plan. I think they're calling the Nairobi Railway Project or so. They want to bring in all types of investments, telcos, commercials, retail, technology, everything. And they're planning on shopping this around to investors. So, this is, again, biggest economy in Eastern Africa. That's Kenya. And they've got some massive plans there for the future with regards to infrastructure investments, something, a whole lot of African countries should be mimicking.
Rotus, could you dwell a little bit more on the flatness that you observe in the market yesterday? What does this mean in terms of risk aversion, particularly on foreign portfolio investors and also local investors? And what kind of incentives would government need to provide to perhaps, re-energize the market? And then how optimistic are we with regard to the point you were making about the second quarter? Are we going to see an improvement, or we're going to see a further, flattening of the market?
Okay, so you've got what's called, great question, you've got risk on and risk off. What we're seeing with the flat performance, you can argue that this is risk off, where the investors are saying, you know what, I'm not really going to trade in the market right now. So the flat performance you're seeing is essentially, again, that's the tailor end of that chart, is essentially little volumes, little action on the exchange. So there's not much trading. I believe yesterday's trading was about, 4.5 billion naira worth of trades. That comes to about $11 million or so. I mean, it was a very, very small amount of trades that took place yesterday. So volumes have come down. It's a wait-and-see approach with regards to investors. One of the catalysts is foreign exchange. Foreign portfolio investors want to be able to repatriate the profits that they make. As far as your question on Q2, it's expected to be bad. I mean, Unilever already released their results. I believe their revenues were down by 30 or 40%. They're in the consumer goods sector. Only financials might perform well during this period. So Q2 is expected expected to not be good because it falls right within the lockdown period when businesses were shut down, and it's also affected publicly traded companies. Incentives, we have to have more liquidity in the market. So with regards to government promoting that, that's what we have to see.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Rotus. We'll see what happens with all the problems with foreign exchange.
Indeed.
Let's move on.
Yes, moving on to some more business updates, this time around the global outlook with Michael Wilson. Hello, Michael. Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. China shares down overnight as that abrupt order from Washington to close the consulate in Houston, that also offered investors who'd been profiting from the rapid rise in the Chinese stock market a sort of way out for a few days. So they took their money off the table. Japan is closed for a 2-day holiday, so the actual amount of trade is has been slightly limited by that. I'll just take you through a couple of emerging market currencies. I covered them yesterday. The Indonesian rupiah got some of its losses back as a result of a weaker dollar, but there's still these US-China tensions, which are crimping things actually, and it's been the worst. The rupee has been the worst performing currency over the year. It rose 0.6% yesterday, which is quite a lot when you think about it. Let's go to European markets then, and they slipped lower yesterday. Concerns about rising rates of coronavirus, and also in the United States, and also this increase in tensions between the US and China. The US, well, as I say, ordered that closure of the consulate in Houston, and this morning the South China Post is running a story saying that China could be closing the US consulate in Chengdu in response. That's not a huge response, but you can see how things are ratcheting up. And talk that the UK itself is not close to any kind of deal with the EU towards the end of the year. That didn't help either. The self-imposed deadline that the UK government has had at the end of the month, there's little indication that any of those sides is actually going to come, either of those sides is actually going to come together. And if you add to that the problems that we were talking about yesterday between the UK and the US as far as their trade deal is concerned, it doesn't bode well really for the second half of the year. On the other hand, US markets, they had a choppy day. Yes, the investors tended to be slightly more optimistic. This is driven by the prospect of a vaccine from Pfizer maybe and BioNTech, as well as the prospect of another stimulus plan. And I was telling you yesterday, the one we were really looking forward to is Tesla and Microsoft. Tesla beat expectations, reporting another fourth straight quarter of profits. And the feeling there is that that might have them included into the S&P 500. They're not on that index at the moment. If that were to happen, something else quite interesting happens, which of course means that they become part of asset funds, and that might mean that the share price is up again. Who knows? At Microsoft, shares dropped a little bit. They didn't underperform, but they've unsurprisingly had a nice bit of revenue from Xbox because everybody's been staying in, or most people have been staying in, and those that know how to do it have been playing video games, so they've been sort of enjoying that kind of boost to their running. Let me give you a general look at the markets as we sort of get into this second half of the year. It looks as though there are clear economic global concerns. I think we all know that. But I think that the markets are sort of hedging their bets about asset allocation as we speak, and equity investors appear at the moment to do what they often do in situations like this. They're cautious about the outlook, and they're buying dips, which is, you know, the way forward, really. You see a share that looks cheap, then you tend to buy it. So you're seeing ratcheting up and then big drops in between. On the other hand, other safe havens like silver, remember I was talking about that yesterday, that's doing well, and gold's doing well too. This week, silver prices have gone up by 18% to their highest level since 2013. Gold prices look set for a retest of their highs as well. And the increase in geopolitical tension is, of course, forcing that. And the only, finally, highlight today, really, is expected to be the US jobless claims, which are expected to rise by 1.3 million. The rate is slowing very, very slightly, but again, with more and more closures coming in, continuing claim numbers are expected to come in at 17.1, down from 17.3. So nothing really happening in the United States, but a gradual improvement in the general picture of the economy there. That's the global view this morning.
Well, Michael Wilson, Alison Rose, the new executive of the renamed, the chief executive of the renamed NatWest Group, has been in the news, and there's been some talk about the Royal Bank of Scotland. Do you want to give us some information in that regard?
Sorry, I didn't quite catch that, Doctor. Could you say that again, please?
Alison Rose, chief executive of NatWest, has been making some statements about how things are likely to get really bad. Some businesses will survive and some businesses will collapse, and some statements also about the Royal Bank of Scotland. Do you have any update on that?
Okay, I think he's right about that. I mean, it doesn't take an enormous brain to see that things probably will get worse, because we just don't know where new jobs are going to be found for people who don't have them at the moment. It doesn't look like there's going to be a V-shaped recovery. If it's anything, it will be a slow U-shape. And what that actually means, of course, for the banks is a rise in bad debts. And, of course, they're suffering from a prospect of negative interest rates. I mean, that seems to be being pushed further away, but interest rates are very, very low. And therefore, pretty obviously, banks are not making money. And that goes for RBS as well. So I think that, generally speaking, it would be a wise person to say, I can predict exactly what's going to happen over the next 6 months. But at the moment, Doctor, it does not look good. I can tell you that. Now, he's right.
All right, real quickly, Michael, I just wanted to ask you about, the Euro package, the Euro fund. They're beginning to say now, it still has to go through the parliament, but they're beginning to say now that countries like Hungary, where you don't have true democracy, where there's still a vestige of dictatorship, that it's going to be very difficult for them to access funds like that. Is it not going to cause another instability in the EU system, with Viktor Orban and his Fidesz party saying that other parts of Europe are really looking at him because of his leadership style?
Yeah, I think that's true. I mean, I was alluding to that yesterday. I did say that we knew what the numbers were, but the big thing is where this money is actually going to be allocated, and if indeed it is going to be allocated by the individual countries to actually helping the after effects of the pandemic. There's no guarantee about that, and this is the problem which the European Central Bank faces. We have this enormous thing which is called the European Union, and it's made up of many, many countries who are very, very different in the way they handle their economies and are at different stages in their economies. And I've always found it very difficult to understand how they're going to put that right. And secondly, as I was saying the day before yesterday, it's not a lot of money. I mean, when you think about Germany having given 1 trillion euros to its own economy itself, never mind this 750 billion euro that's actually going to be split, as far as we know, between most of the countries within the EU. It's not a lot of money. It is, as somebody said to me yesterday, and I did put this on the programme as well, it's just like flicking a coin into a begging bowl, quite honestly.
And Michael, very briefly, I mean, we do understand the spat between the two largest economies in the world, the US and China. But the closure of that consulate in Houston, do you think it's a step too far by the US?
I think what you have to do is to look at whether you think the phase 1 of these trade talks is actually, the United States would have to say this is a done deal and still on. I'm not so sure it is. I think that when we see the consulate's a tiny thing, it's another indication, really. I think the big thing would be to see a big no about continuing trade talks. That really would be a problem. I don't think China will want that. I still think that the way ahead with China despite its mystery and its lack of clear intentions about what it's doing, is actually somebody we need to engage with. You engage with it already in Africa. I know there are many countries in Africa who've taken money. They don't like the fact that they are indebted to the Chinese, but that's the way of the world, unfortunately. So what you have to do, there's plenty of money on the sidelines there, waiting for investment, as we see every day. So what you have to do is engage them in constructive discussions, which I think is the way forward for the world we find ourselves in.
Thank you very much, Michael Wilson, for the update.
Yeah.
Well, Aaron Akarijala now brings us update on COVID-19 pandemic. Hello, Aaron.
Good morning to you, Dr.
Good morning, Aaron.
And good morning to you, Rufai. And let's get straight into it. As a matter of fact, this morning, let's bring you the global figures in terms of cases of COVID-19 around the world. And as it stands right now, 15,231,967. That's the actual number of COVID-19 cases around the world, which is quite frightening because just yesterday evening, it crossed the 50 million mark. Right now, we have well over 15,231,000. All right, in terms of COVID-19 cases, and the number of deaths still rising, 623,491. Well, let's try to chime it in and bring it into the U.S., where quite a lot is actually going on in terms of COVID-19. And let's start it off from the fact that President Donald Trump has been hinting, not directly accusing, but has been hinting that the Black Lives Matter protest that happened on the killing of George Floyd was a super spreader for COVID-19. Experts have said no, that since most of the people that actually participated in that Black Lives Matter wore face masks and the rest of them and took all the precautions and they were outside, there are no scientific evidences that what happened in New York, Chicago, Minneapolis, Washington, and other cities actually spread COVID-19. So it's still a back and forth here, but he's saying that the spread we're seeing, because now let's actually get into the U.S. Graph in terms of COVID-19 and how things are actually playing out. And you can actually see that the U.S. are still posting very grave numbers at the moment. If you can help us with the graph, over 3 million cases of COVID-19 are actually in the U.S. And we're beginning to see clusters in several places. But in the meantime, Deborah Birx, talking about the chief medical officer of the White House Presidential Task Force on COVID-19. This beautiful lady has also warned several cities. She's mentioned different cities and said that they should be very careful because there are certain rises, and if they do not take aggressive steps to mitigate the outbreaks that they are seeing in their cities, that we might just be witnessing something quite different from what they witnessed in the peak of March and April, talking about COVID-19 numbers in the U.S. She had a private conversation with 11 major cities, which included Baltimore, Cleveland, Columbus, Indianapolis, Las Vegas, Miami, Nashville, New Orleans, Pittsburgh, and St. Louis. Now, if our U.S. figures are actually ready, you can actually, let's try to break it down, because if you see it closely, you'll certainly see the number of cases actually rising in some of the cities that she's actually mentioned. So far, so good. Okay, since we don't have that, let's actually move on to Africa right now. Looking at Africa and in terms of COVID-19, I must actually say that Africa right now, we are posting quite a number of high cases in Africa. As a matter of fact, 750,000 of those cases in Africa are really, really troubling, because we can actually see the numbers. They're very, very high, and southern part of Africa is still posting grave numbers. South Africa, like the picture we just saw before now, South Africa certainly is a major contributing factor to what we're seeing going down in Africa. At the moment, you can see that they are close to 6,000 deaths in Africa, South Africa alone, with Gauteng being the capital of COVID-19, but the Western Cape being the death capital or the death epicenter of COVID-19 in South Africa. And the government seems to be confounded, not understanding what is really going on. And even those who are doing vaccine testing in South Africa also at a loss at the number of, or the way the virus is spreading in South Africa. We're actually hoping that these things can be put under control and it doesn't go out of hand. Although some people say maybe the reason why the numbers are this grave is the fact that you can see the number of tested people there still standing well over 2.5 million, which is the highest by far by any country on the continent, although also experts are still saying that down the line we might be getting, or COVID-19 might be ravaging Africa more towards the end of the year as against right now, because when you put it per capita and also when you look at it per continent, you'll find out that aside the Oceania region, Africa still posted the least number of figures, not the least number of deaths. But while Africa is rising, places like the US, places like the UK are actually going, places like the UK and also Europe are actually going down. The only place that things are really spiraling out of control is the Americas, Latin America to be very precise, where we're seeing numbers that are actually very, very frightening. And that's how things are actually playing out this morning.
I mean, very, very important insight you've given there, Aaron. But for me, what scares me is the way the numbers in provinces like Gauteng keeps rising in South Africa. You don't have any sort of abatement in those numbers. And it shocks me, because I begin to ask the question. I know it's funny that nobody will ask that question any longer, that when are we going to, see the curve flatten in Africa? Because it just looks as though for the past 4 or 5 months now, the numbers have just been going up. In America for some time, the curve flattened at some point before we're not having what we call a second wave. So if they're having a second wave already, when are we even going to end that first wave in parts of Africa? That's a big question I want to ask. Secondly, as regards the vaccines, a lot of work has been going on in Oxford and some other parts. Another thing I'd like to push forward is what Dr. Abati raised the other day about how we can start the vaccines race now. And I just wanted to suggest, rather than giving us $1 million US to fight COVID, would it have been fair for Bill Gates to just say, okay, we will get you some supplies of vaccine? Because Bill Gates has done a lot of work as regards vaccine all over the world. We all know how he's been in the vanguard of a polio vaccine and other vaccines for children in Africa. So maybe if he can direct his donations towards just getting the products available, and we can start a national vaccination campaign for COVID when the vaccines finally come out and they're approved, maybe that will just be the way to go.
Well, the contribution by Bill Gates is a contribution to what is called the One United Nations Basket Fund, which is managed by the UNDP. Yeah. And, that is managed to address a number of issues in Nigeria. And the UNDP, the One UN Basket Fund that was established in April, has received contributions from various sources. And perhaps it is better that is managed centrally by the United Nations itself to, address issues of transparency and accountability. Although there is a project board in Nigeria that works with the UNDP in Nigeria to manage the donation from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and from other sources. But quickly, to address the issue you raised about the numbers in Africa, I think that the major challenge that we have in Africa is the fragility of the health infrastructure. And even the numbers that you quoted, those numbers may not even be the actual numbers, because it's only maybe perhaps in South Africa that we have a lot of testing that is going on. And I think in Africa, we still need to ramp up the testing to have a clear picture of what is happening within the continent. So it may not be right when Dr. Deborah Briggs of the United States says, for example, that the Southern Hemisphere tends to be doing better. But in Nigeria, 2 quick issues. Dr. Fayemi of Ekiti State tested positive after 3 tests. We wish him a speedy recovery. And then in Kano, the government has said, look, festivities should be reduced during Salah, which is just around the corner. I hope that other states of the Federation will also give that kind of guideline, that Salah is around, but people should be careful. They should observe the guidelines with regard to COVID-19. Okay.